paranormal experiences don't really work to a timescale, and therefore we invite you to listen to a dark minisode. Hello listeners, and welcome back to another midweek minisode before we reach episode 8 of season 15. For some reason, this particular season seems to have gone by quicker than any previous season, and I'm completely unaware why that may be. It may well be that I think this is our best season to date, and that'll be down to episodes such as Demon on My Shoulder, which quite obviously resonated with a hell of a lot of people. It also could be that I know what's still yet to come. So you may be thinking, I don't think this is the best season yet. Well, hopefully the last 3 episodes will change your mind on that. For me personally, knowing what is to come, I'd say this could well be our strongest end to a season ever. But before we reach our triad of final episodes, we have a short minisode sent in directly from one of our wonderful listeners. The following chronicle of paranormal experiences has been sent in by our listener Anna, and they write, Dear listeners, I enjoy writing immensely, and most of the time, I honestly think I'm quite good. Whilst writing this, however, it's as if I'm experiencing some kind of writer's block, which is preventing me from taking these factual accounts of my life and sprucing them up for your entertainment. So I do apologise if my writing seems drab, but writing this, actually putting everything down on paper, has drained me completely. Ever since I can remember, I've been fascinated with the paranormal. However, growing up in a small South African farming town, even a mere mention of the paranormal tended to get one in trouble, especially with the pious congregation members of the tall steepled church, which was built smack dab in the middle of the town, its bell ringing hourly as a constant reminder of its sovereignty over the townsfolk. My fascination with all things paranormal didn't start as a conscious decision. It wasn't a choice that I made, but rather an innate pull, like a current in my blood stirring to life whenever the inexplicable whispered its secrets. As if some old, slumbering part of me was activated whenever I heard or read about something which couldn't be explained by mere logic. When my grandfather was alive, a large deal of time we spent together was filled with tales of ghosts and ghouls and sorcery, all of which involved some family member or other. These stories were much to the disdain of my grandmother, who grew up in a very strict, very Victorian household, and they rejected any notion of the existence of a paranormal world. But I felt an uncanny kinship with these tales, as if I possessed a sixth sense for discerning the truth amongst these fanciful narratives spun by my grandfather. Little did I realise that these stories were more than mere entertainment. They were threads in the tapestry of my destiny, woven to prepare me for the path ahead, a path from which my grandfather would soon depart, leaving me to navigate its twists and turns alone. The first supernatural encounter I can remember happened when I was around 4 years old. My family was living on a farm in the eastern Free State Highlands. It was a beautiful spring evening, and I was playing outside near a small sandstone rock formation. It was a few meters away from our home. I enjoyed playing there around sunset because that's when my friends came to visit. My friends were small, shiny beings with whispering voices reminiscent of sleigh bells. I can't remember all the conversations that we ever had, but I do remember the last one vividly. "Come with us," the shiny beings whispered. I can't. I can't leave my mother and my little brother. I was sad that I couldn't go with them, but even sadder at the idea of leaving my family. Despite me declining their offer, for some reason, I kept walking further and further away from the house, as if in a trance. It was my mother's stern voice shouting from a distance, "Where do you think you're going, madam?" that brought me back to reality. Well, I ran home as fast as I could into my mother's embrace. My friends, which I now believe to be fairies, never came back again. In the years that followed, my encounters with the paranormal were sporadic, marked by fleeting glimpses of the future and spectral presences lurking at the periphery of my perception. It wasn't until adolescence that the veil between the seen and the unseen grew thin, revealing glimpses of a world teeming with darkness and foreboding. I was about 16 when, one night, my very dear, very deceased dog greeted me at the gate. A few months later, a ghost boy patted me on the shoulder during assembly, and I saw a ghostly figure sitting on the steps of the town's museum, and so the list goes on. Another encounter I clearly remember was when I was about 17. I went to pick my brothers up from a youth gathering at church one night, and on my way there, I drove past a sad-looking lady with a baby in her arms. She looked so exhausted. I still remember the way her feet were dragging along the gravel road. I stopped, and I began reversing the car back towards her. But when I looked in the rear-view mirror, she had vanished. The hairs on the back of my neck rose, and I could not get to that church quick enough. On that very same night, on our way back home, I saw a man on the roof of the local hardware store in town, and he looked like he was going to jump. "Stop!" I yelled out, slamming the brakes and getting out of the car. But the man was gone. One of my brothers shouted at me angrily, "Are you bloody crazy? You could have killed us." But then the youngest one of the four whispered, it wasn't her fault. It was the man on the roof. A few weeks after this incident, my mother's cousin came back to visit us. She'd emigrated to Australia years before, and it was the first time she'd been back in South Africa since I was a little kid. She and my mum were like sisters since childhood, and she always was more like an aunt to me than my real aunts were. One day she and I were making her famous fig jam, and I don't know exactly why, but I decided to confide in her about the things I'd been experiencing, and the fact I suspected I was going completely bonkers. "Do you remember the stories your late grandfather told you? About Upakus and the black ghost dog that would walk with him whenever he went to the neighbouring farm? Or the one where he saw a Voortrekker girl in the tree? Or the one where his sister, Auntie Betts, saw the one-legged soldier in hospital? These are not just stories, my child. These are real-life encounters, all of which our family has had with spirits. So there's nothing wrong with you. You just take after your grandpa's family. And they may have been a lot of things, but crazy certainly wasn't one of them. She proceeded to tell me more about my grandfather's side of the family and their encounters with the supernatural. How my grandfather experienced death premonitions in the form of visions. She also told me how my great-grandfather saw ghosts on a regular basis, and how my own mother had precognition abilities when she was a child. I started looking at my psychic abilities in the same way I looked at my hazel eyes and crooked nose, an inheritance from my ancestors, and I became more at peace with it. Just when I thought that being sensitive to the supernatural wasn't that bad, my soul was quite literally nearly ripped out of my body. Let's have a quick break to talk to you about Policy Genius. Now, we all like to put off life insurance talk because it reminds us of our mortality. But life insurance isn't about death, it's about life. It's about ensuring the lives of those you love remain secure and comfortable. And I'm sure many of you will think, well, I'm covered through work or I'm covered through my bank account, but believe me, you want to check those finer details because you may be surprised what you're actually covered for. And this is exactly where Policy Genius come into their own. Yes, we could talk about how Policy Genius is America's leading online insurance marketplace, or how their award-winning agents will walk you step by step through the entire process. But the best thing about Policy Genius for me is they don't have a dog in the fight. They're not going to strong-arm you towards one company or another. They've no incentive to do so. Their only incentive is to listen to your needs, scour America's top companies, and find you the best price. For example, with Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that begin at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options even offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. There's a reason why Policy Genius has thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, and you'll find out what it is when you tick life insurance off your to-do list with Policy Genius. So head over to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com. One night, around 11 p.m, I was sinking into a deep slumber when, all of a sudden, it felt like my soul was being pulled from my chest. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I was totally paralyzed. I knew I was dying and there was nothing I could do about it. A knock on my bedroom door made my soul snap back into my body like a rubber band. I could move again. I leapt out of bed, flung open the door, and jumped into my eldest brother's arms, screaming and crying hysterically. I think I woke the whole house, and everyone came pouring out of their bedrooms to see what the fuss was all about. I told them all what happened, and everyone rolled their eyes, saying it was probably a bad dream. Everyone except my eldest brother. "How did you know?" I asked him. I saw a flash of light coming from underneath your bedroom door, and I knew I had to come and check if you were okay. Well, I've had trouble sleeping ever since. I don't know what I encountered that night, but I know it was something dark and something evil. Something I never want to deal with ever again. A few relatively normal years went by after that encounter. With normal, I mean having had a few ghostly women whisper in my ear at my old job, or experiencing precognition about certain things, or having my leg pulled into a grave in a church cemetery. That type of normal. However, as life works, everything cannot be friendly ghosts and rainbows forever. The town I live in is more than 150 years old, but has been inhabited for thousands of years. The Khoi San rock art scattered across the area. Is it haunted? Most definitely. But growing up, I always experienced the energy to be peaceful and bright. Over the past few years, I'd say around the COVID outbreak, but maybe a bit after that, things have started to change here. Now, something heavy and dark engulfs this town. My intuition tells me that it's always been present, but that it mostly remains dormant until something activates it with energy to wreak havoc. I can feel it most nights. When I open my back door or look out of the window, or I drive home from work, it's like a heavy, thick fog that brushes against your skin. It makes it difficult to breathe. And I don't want to be out on those nights. It's on those nights that crime and violence also increase. I know this for a fact because, as due to my job, I often work these statistics. And I know it because I've been recognizing a pattern over the last few months. The veil is thinning. I've started seeing apparitions and having premonitions I know not what to do with, and then it strikes. Someone dies, or crime rises, or some other natural disaster strikes. It's as if whatever evil is lurking in the darkness fuels these people. It drives them to these mad acts and, what's worse, protects them from being caught. Like the murderer of a local woman who is still roaming free. I know I'm not the only one who feels this darkness. Many people do. Granted, maybe not with the same intensity. But I know this because for the last 2 years, groups of church members have been praying at the corners of our town on a regular basis, almost salving it against evil. Somehow I think it's doing more harm than good, agitating whatever evil has its grip on this place. I've even come face to face with this darkness one night, a few months ago. I joined my youngest brother on patrol on the outskirts of town. It's a long story, but in South Africa, you've got volunteers who form part of a neighbourhood farm watch thing, and they do things like drive around because police are too understaffed and they lack resources. We were driving around in this truck, on the lookout for any suspicious activity, when we received a message on the emergency group that a lady's dog was barking non-stop. She lived in a small house on the hill, and we drove around it 2 times, but everything seemed fine. We decided to have a look around the surrounding area as well, and as we drove down a gravel road which led into a clearing, which was also a dead end, I told my brother to stop and turn round. I told him that something felt off. Something was deeply wrong, and that if we drove into that clearing, something horrible would happen to us. I knew it, because I could see the darkness surrounding the area, licking at it like the hungry tongues of a veld fire, just waiting to incinerate us. My brother was still laughing at me when he suddenly started reversing his truck at speed. I honestly didn't know that was physically possible. As a sudden explanation, he just said, "I felt it too," and left it at that. Now, my brother is a big man. He's nearly 2 meters tall. He weighs 127 kilograms. He isn't scared of anything. But his tanned skin was pale as death, and his entire body was shivering in fear when he said it. We drove home in silence, and we've never spoke about the incident since. Looking back, I feel that was an ancient sacrifice spot, and we were being led like lambs to the slaughter that night. I wish I could say the darkness has passed, but it's sticking its claws out into the night once again. I can feel slivers of it when I'm driving along the hills of this town. I hear it breathing against my neck when I walk in the streets at night. It hides in the bushes and in between the cracks of the 150-year-old buildings. Even the church, with its tall steeple that pretends to be above it all. Thank you, Anna, for such a detailed, descriptive, well-written and terrifying email. I will say, for our listeners' benefit, Anna has also included a paragraph just for my eyes. But in a nutshell, it's more of a description to let me know things are picking back up. So Anna, if you're listening to this, please continue to keep us all updated about the goings-on in your town. And who knows, we may end up with a follow-up minisode or even a full episode of Season 16 of The Dark Paranormal. Don't forget, guys, we never close our submissions. So if you have an experience which you think is suitable for either a minisode or a full episode of The Dark Paranormal for Season 16, email it over to contact@thedarkparanormal.com. And in the meantime, stay safe, and I'll speak to you all on Friday for episode 8 of Season 15. Until then, take care.